Musunuri, CEO, and Sanjay Subramanian, CFO of Ocugen. Ocugen is a clinical stage company developing therapies for underserved eye diseases with novel gene therapies. Additionally, the company recently entered into a development and commercial agreement with the Indian firm Bharat Biotech to commercialize a whole variant inactivated COVID-19 vaccine called Covaxin. Covaxin currently has been approved under the EUA in India, and the partner recently released some exciting interim phase 3 data. Ocugen plans to submit a EUA in the United States and apply with the FDA. So to learn more about Covaxin and the rest of the pipeline, let's get started with Shanker and Sanjay. Good morning, Shanker and Sanjay. Glad to see you both and appreciate you accepting our invitation to talk to our audience this morning. Let us start our discussion by talking through some of your thoughts for commercialization of Covaxin and your long-term strategy for pipeline development. So to start off, Shanker, briefly, could you help us set the stage for how we should think of Covaxin relative to the 3 vaccines that are already received the EUA in the United States?
Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, thank you, RK, for inviting us to have a fireside chat today. Again, there are 3 vaccines in the US. They're all based on, spike protein, 1 antigen-based vaccines. And whereas Covaxin, as you mentioned, is a whole variant. It has a whole virus structure, and it has got multiple antigen. In addition to spike, there's a significant part of it is nucleocapsid protein. The reason why it's important, and as you've seen, there is a lot of variants emerging with this virus, and the controlling of the pandemic depends on how do you control those variants. And I think that's where Covaxin comes in play. That's a first significant difference, where when you get a protection against multiple antigen, which our partners have shown in the early stage clinical trials with a significant in humoral and cellular responses. And that means, when the variants come in, it has ability, a potential ability to protect the new variants, because then you want to minimize the viral escape or eliminate it to control the pandemic. That's very important. So this vaccine has potential to do that. Number 2, in the clinical studies, they have taken down all the way up to age 12 plus in phase 2 clinical trials. And the currently approved vaccines, not approved, I want to correct, it's emergency use authorizations, the 3 vaccines which got in the US, and they go down to, one of them goes down to 16, and other 2 go up to 18 plus. That's very important. Covering children is important. So our partner has generated data in early stage clinical trials in 12 plus. And also the background about Covaxin, the way it's made, these inactivated viral vaccines have been there in existence for many, many, many years. And one good example is polio vaccine, which is currently used for including babies in our country here. Therefore, this vaccine, the process and the way it's made is very safe for all age groups. That's going to be a good vaccine for all age groups and the high risk entire population. So that's very important, right? Because you want to bring a vaccine where you can also give it to children, you want to give it to high risk groups. So based on at least the experience and the background of the polio virus, it's good for kids. And so that's a demographic you need to cover. The third most important thing is the storage. And this is a stored at a refrigerated conditions. How traditionally vaccines are stored at 2 to 8 degrees. It doesn't require freezing temperatures, which is very difficult to distribute, store, as well as for future stockpile. If we control the pandemic, let's say in the next few years, then after that, there'll still be outbreaks. So if you want to stockpile, if CDC wants to stockpile a vaccine, you need to have, a good storage condition, which could be stable at refrigerated temperature for about 2 years would be ideal, right? Then you can stockpile it and use it when the breakouts come to control it. So those are the 3 key factors, how we differentiate Covaxin from other vaccines currently being marketed in the US.
So one of the hot topics, obviously, is the variants, and we are seeing some resurgence of the infection, and people are attributing it to the variants. So can you kind of drum up a little bit on your thoughts on the variants and how the Covaxin could be a weapon in the armamentarium against the variants?
Yes, yeah. So that's a good question. Again, segue into, yeah, currently we have UK variants, and there is a South African and Brazilian variants, and they're spreading. Again, new variants are coming down every day almost. So how do we, take Covaxin? How would it fit, in treating or preventing these variants from escape or viral escape, you can call it. So Covaxin, actually, our partner has generated data using UK strain. I mean, this is again a good study. This is taking a strain from the patient's live virus and doing a standard plaque assay. So this is how it should be done. Not a lab engineered virus. You actually take the actual live virus from the people who are infected with these variants, and then doing a neutralization assay to show it's effective. In fact, they have done that. They published it, showing comparison to the current strains versus the UK strain, and showing there is no statistical difference in neutralization effect. That means it's effective. So that's good. And we're also anticipating data from the Brazilian strain and South African strain shortly. And when we get that, we'll definitely update the markets. And again, at least having that data from 3 different strains, if we can show it's effective and neutralizing effect is equally good, it's not coming down, I mean, that proves the point. It's a broad-based vaccine, and it could be used for future variants. That means people who take other vaccines, and if this is effective against variants, maybe it has potential to be a booster for these patients and individuals, so that we can control the viral spread.
Yeah, so you don't need to be doing a Moderna 2.0 kind of a stuff.
Yeah, because that's a good point, RK, because people need to understand it. I mean, these variants are changing so fast. I mean, look at it. They got new variants in New York. There are variants in California. Okay, you're going to develop a newer vaccine based on the spike protein, based on, let's say, South African variant. Okay, in 3 months, there are other variants. How are you going to vaccinate 350 million Americans? At least you need to vaccinate 80% of them to get the herd immunity and control the pandemic, right? How are you going to do that?
Very good. Now I get the point. Just in a quick discussion regarding your agreement with Bharat, and also what your obligations are towards the agreement, and what is your partner going to be doing so that this whole commercialization will be a successful one?
That's a good question. I'll let Sanjay take that. Sanjay.
I guess I was on mute there. So thanks, RK, for having us here. Our agreement with Bharat Biotech has been structured it's a win-win partnership. For us, it was important to have an agreement which was aligned, so that what we structured it was as like a profit sharing agreement. Bharat Biotech is going to provide us the data, clinical data, for all the work that is being done in India, and on the back of that, we're going to apply to the FDA for the emergency use authorization, which the work is ongoing and in a very good way, as Shanker mentioned. And then all the costs that are associated with the supply, with all the tech transfers and everything, will be factored in almost like a separate P&L, and we will share the profits, where Ocugen will retain 45% of the profits, and the remaining 35% will be shared with Bharat Biotech. Again, it goes back to, we win together, and it's about generating that right synergies within the companies and alignment on that one.
Perfect. How have you and the management, Shanker, you and the management have been preparing, both in terms of regulatory, as well as Sanjay and his team preparing on the commercial fronts to ensure Covaxin, can become successful both at the FDA and also in the market?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, loaded. So again, we are in communications with FDA, and we do have a regulatory path, and we do, FDA did comment on our interim look, and they're fine with it. And once again, as we get more data, and we're targeting the EUA submission in April, when we're close to that, we'll update the markets. And after that, obviously, if you take the current timeline how FDA is taking based on the recent EUA authorization, it takes about 4 weeks after that. So if you were expecting that to happen, so if everything goes according to the plan, that means we have to start deploying doses as early as second quarter. So from the supply perspective, the first step is we do allow, based on our agreement, Bharat Biotech has to supply tens of millions of doses. That will be the quick, import into US. And we are setting up release testing in one of the FDA-approved laboratories here, and that's going to happen. We're doing currently the technology transfer. And so we'll be releasing the product to the US market through Oxygen Control, which is being tested in the US. And the second step is we're working with US manufacturers on the drug product manufacturing at this stage. And we are planning to tech transfer that. And that will set the stage for US production after the initial doses from Bharat. And so that will allow us to quickly scale up the capacities. And our goal is to, again, supply, target to 100 million doses this year, right? So from the commercial perspective, once again, we are working with government agencies right now as we speak. And we're hoping we'll get some commitment from the government because it's a differentiated vaccine. It's much needed in our toolkit, in our arsenal in the US. So based on that, typically, if you got, government contract and commitments, and they can actually pick up, and they'll take care of the supply and distribution, just as they're doing with, other companies. So obviously it'll be X-Works from, our contract manufacturing facility at our CMO, from the cold storage. They'll take it, they'll deploy it. That's the first step of the way for commercialization. Obviously, we believe that's going to continue in the foreseeable future until the pandemic gets into certain control. And then after that, then people may be looking into the private distributions. So at this stage, I think we believe that it will be a simple process. Obviously, having that refrigerator storage will benefit significantly.
Okay. So one last question on Covaxin. Covaxin could either become a short-term strategy or a long-term strategy, obviously, depending on how the pandemic, is handled in the United States. But in general, how does it work for you as a strategy in terms of long-term growth for the company itself?
Yeah. Definitely. So again, we cannot predict sitting here today, just as no one can predict how long this pandemic is going to last. We're all, trying to contribute and see how we can control this. So obviously, I would say, it will last a little bit. It's not going to be really, really short term, and at least, a few years. And during that time, obviously, we'll be making significant contributions as I shared, we're planning to bring manufacturing to US and significantly scale up and continue to contribute. And obviously, we have to do, additional studies as necessary to expand the label to children and high risk. And also, one of the things, as I mentioned to you, and if our data comes out the way we're thinking, potentially effective against variants, that will also open up, a good market for us. Could be a booster for all the recipients who received other vaccines. Mm-hmm. So that can probably control the pandemic too. ideally, that's what we would like to see, open up, and so people can go back to normal life. So during that time frame, you asked a very good question, right? You have let's assume it's a 3 years, whatever, right? You got a good growth with Covaxin and you're taking off just as other vaccine companies. How do you sustain that kind of a growth and grow the organization? And once again, taking back, we're a gene therapy company. We're making significant progress on the gene therapy side. And our first product, OCU400, And we recently received a broad, retinitis pigmentosa and LCA indications, orphan drug designation from, EMA. That means, this product can go after many, genetic mutations, or 175, combining of these two diseases. So that's a big program. That program is going smoothly, and we have completed, our pilot talks, and we're currently doing GLP tox studies. And so as soon as that tox report is available, our manufacturing has been successfully scaled up, and it's ready to go. The product is there. And so therefore, by second half of this year, as we announced before, we're planning to submit the IND, and that will get into the clinic, at 2 parallel phase 1/2 trials. And then we also have other programs that will be in the clinic. Our next gene therapy program, OCU410, which is targeting a huge disease, dry AMD. You're talking about 9 to 10 million patients in US alone. Just imagine, if you could give a single dose of gene therapy, at the back of the eye, 10 million patients in the US, additional 10 million in Europe, tens of millions globally. And that's going to be a game changer. If, potentially, if it treats these patients, I think we can go to the clinic with that next year. That's going to be, bigger trials, huge inflection points for the company. And then we got a biological program, that's going into diabetic macular edema next year in the clinic. So in the next, in addition to Covaxin will have its own clinical trials to expand the label, because that's the reason we're bringing this here, right? So in addition to that, we got about 4 clinical trials, at least we are planning, encompassing other retinal programs. And then, as any other growing company, RK, people have to be mindful, and they need to be opportunistic. We'll constantly, Sanjay, not only the CFO, he's also heading up the corporate development, and we'll continue to monitor anything we can do. Because, with this Covaxin, it's allowing us to enter into different disease area from ophthalmology. Now we are in infectious diseases, and we'll continue to monitor that. And as the company is growing, we have a bigger organization, and we can handle more. We will look into other opportunities to keep up the growth.
Perfect. I know you spoke a lot about your pipeline already, but I think for people who don't understand, the key aspect of your technology is the modifier gene therapy platform. And for people who just think about just genetic therapy, this is not like the typical genetic therapy. This is a little bit different. Could you highlight, for the folks who don't, who are not still have a good understanding of the modifier gene therapy, what that is, what is the strength that your technology brings to the gene therapy platform as such? Yeah.
So if you take the traditional gene therapy, there is one product in the marketplace targeting RPE65 mutation. So it's a good product. It's the first gene therapy. It's great. They paved the way to get into the market with a new technology, which is very beneficial for other companies. So, however, if you take retinitis pigmentosa, right, there are about 150 mutations identified in 150 genetic mutations identified, at least, that only represent 60% of the population. And remaining 40% are random and unknown. About 1.5 to 2 million people across the globe struggle with this disease. So if you take that traditional approach, the gene therapy, which got approved for a single mutation, it covers about, let's say, 1,000 patients in the US, right? And however, that's only targeting that one genetic mutation. So if you want to develop products for all those 150 genes, which got different mutations, you need to develop at least 150 products. Still not addressing the entire RP. So it is almost impossible and impractical to develop 150 products. For each product, it takes 8 to 10 years, significant capital and resources, and to take care of these people. Many of these people are patients are desperate. Why? Because many of them could become legally blind by the time they're in mid-40s. So there is that desperation. There is a significant need for rescue in sooner than later, right? So that's where we come in. Modifier gene therapy platform we have, OCU400, that's the reason we got a broad RP, orphan drug designation, as well as for LCA in the EU, because we demonstrated the way these molecules, these genes work. They're higher up on the regulatory pathway. They're modifier genes, and they control the functional network in the retina, starting from cell development to inflammation to cell survival. And they upregulate many genes in those functional networks and reset the homeostasis and restore the normal biological function processes. So based on that, we have demonstrated, based on the publication came out in Nature Gene Therapy last year, taking the same product, OCU400, targeting 5 different animal models, which represent 5 different human diseases, and showed a significant rescue using multiple endpoints, including a functional endpoint, and also showed safety. Because if you target a therapy for broad scope, sometimes people may question, hey, are there any off-target effects? And that publication goes into those details too, giving it to the normal animals, this gene, NR2E3, which is an OCU400 through AAV vector, didn't result in the off-target effect. It's safe. So we already demonstrated. That's why the power of this platform, this OCU400, we believe it can be a potential target for entire RP and LCA. So that's a significant difference compared to any other approaches by other companies today.
Perfect. So in the last 30 seconds or so that we have here, 2 quick questions. One, what's your current cash runway? And for an investor, what should be his or her expectations be from Ocugen, for not only for Covaxin, but beyond Covaxin over the, say, next 12 months or so?
Thank you, RK.
Sanjay, take that. Go ahead.
Thank you, RK. Great question. And our financial position as a company has never been stronger. We are very well positioned. We had previously in Q3 had highlighted that we have an ATM program with 30 million capacity, and when we have accessed some of it. We have also recently did a financing of a registered direct offering of 23 million. So between those two, we are very well positioned in terms of our cash runway. And one thing that investors should always expect from Ocugen, the management team is stead focused on our mission to kind of develop the gene therapies as well as saving lives for COVID-19. We're always looking for creative ways and win-win partnership transactions like we did with Bharat Biotech, what we previously did with CanSino Biologics for the OCU400 manufacturing. So it's a team that's always focused on the patients and the shareholders. We will use our capital in the most efficient ways. We'll structure transactions that are win-win partnerships, which are always creative and shareholder creative, and that's always been our mission to kind of look at all our stakeholders and make them beneficial.
Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for taking this time. I will talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.